Okay, let's get into the afternoon program. The quicker we can get into it, the quicker we can go home later on. So I've got two presentations this afternoon. One's on 7 tips for parenting boys and 7 tips for parenting girls, which is the first presentation. The second one's on raising resilience and how we grow resilience in our kids, which is a often talked about topic as well. But before we get into the afternoon program, yes?
Just want to do one announcement. And just want to ask you, if anybody has a question, please raise your hand. Brother Jordan will come with the mic.
You want to talk to that one?
Very quick, and it mightn't be helpful because there's not many here, but if someone's lost a phone, we had some kids, it's it. It's especially on the subjects we've been talking about. Maybe they tossed it, I don't know, that's it. But if you want it back, or if you know if someone's lost it, I know there was one lost a couple of weeks ago, it might be it because it was found outside. So just explain to me what it looks like, sort of thing, and it's all yours. Yep. Thank you.
Or maybe ask Siri whose phone belonged to. Yes, tossing phones. David Gillespie, who wrote those books this morning, The Great Brain Reset and Teen Brain, said if he had his way, he would toss them, the phone and the iPad, but he said he knows that we live in a society where you can't do that. So he said basically we need to learn how to have balance, variety and moderation, what that looks like. And he said to be able to put your phone down and walk away from it, he said, see if you can do that. If you can't, you're addicted. But he said, with our kids, he said, you try removing their phone or their game or their device and see how they react. If they start throwing a tantrum, yelling and screaming, so that is a definite sign of addiction. He said he told a story of one mother that threw the Xbox into the pool and the son, dressed in uniform, dove in after it in uniform. That's how much he loved his Xbox and couldn't live without it. So yeah, there's a lot, the technological age, interesting age. As I said, now the AI age is coming, and that's even more of a worry, what that's going to do. But yeah, anyway, before we get into the afternoon presentation, some have asked, is there time for questions? And this morning we're on time constraints, so I had to try and pack in as much as possible. But I thought we'll pause now and just ask if there's any questions on this morning, the first presentation on technology or the sermon. Feel free to ask those questions now. Because, we've got time to unpack it a little bit. So if you've got any questions, we'll take 4 or 5 questions now if you've got some you want to talk about. And please speak loudly because I'm deaf. I might need someone to pass the message on if I don't hear it because I rely on technology to be able to hear properly. So, yeah. But any questions? Yes. I've got a microphone that will help me to hear. Yep, thank you. Yep. Over here.
All right. This is from your first presentation.
Yes.
You're talking about these devices, how they're making inroads into the life of the teenagers and how they are helping to a certain extent to create a certain personality within them. I noticed that the principle that I see in that is the time factor, the time that they use to spend on these instruments. And because of that time factor, they are changing into whatever they are watching. So my question then is, as a church, what can the church do to mitigate this, to minimize the damage or the blow that these things are causing our teenagers? Do you think then that we as a church should understand all this that's happening and then adapt our way of worship or whatever in order to combat this, knowing that the principle that is affecting them is time. They're using a lot of time. They participate in these things. Can we as a church also come up with ideas how we can have these kids or teenagers participate in something in the service so they can spend time on actual things in the service, so it will match the other. Or you may have other ideas how we can, mitigate all these things that's
You
happening.
mean the church service itself or in general with our kids?
Yeah, the activities of the church, which includes the church service.
Yep,
yes.
the activities of the church. Yeah,
Or the
I've
life
got a
of the
couple of
church.
answers to that one and ideas. This is something that we need to talk about and debate as a group. A couple of things to think about. When Pathfinders go on camporees, they often go places where there's no signal. And it's interesting to watch what the kids do. For the first little while, they're a little bit bewildered, but very quickly they start to look each other in the eye again. They start to actually talk and have conversation and begin to interact with their environment. Whereas when they're here, you're often looking down and connected to the device, but not connected to those around them. So Pathfinders and adventurers, the camping, the experiences that they go on are often very good for training our kids to be off their technology and connecting with each other, God and nature. That combination, each other, God and nature, is a good combination that Pathfinders naturally provides. The other thing to think about, and this is what I didn't mention this morning, I've run out of time, but when you read all the research, a lot of the non-Christian researchers are talking about what they call a digital-free Sabbath. And what they're recommending is that families disconnect for the weekend. So Friday night, all the devices, including dads and mums, get put into a lockbox or something like that. They're locked away, the modem's turned off, and they don't come on again until late Sunday night or Monday morning. And a lot of families, a lot of research is saying that is encouraging families to spend detox time when they can actually relax and be together. Then the board games come out. They discover that they've got neighbours that exist and are nice and friendly to talk to. The kids discover the backyard. The slow meals together happen, and the kids gravitate, or the family gravitates from their bedrooms back to the lounge room when those detox. Now, this is what general research is saying. How much should we as Seventh-day Adventists be promoting that idea of being off all of us being off our devices? Digital-free Sabbath is something that I think we should be talking about. I was talking to a friend of mine who had another denomination. He said, you Adventists, he said, your best evangelism, he said, is the Sabbath in this day and age. He said, you guys preach the law of the Sabbath, but you don't preach the spirit of the Sabbath. And I took that really hard, but it's true. We are so concerned about preaching about the right day to keep, but we don't often preach about how to keep that day. And he said the spirit of your Sabbath is what we all want. So yeah.
Can I say something first, real quick? Being a Pathfinder leader, I've seen kids most of the time cope with not having a phone at camps. I think the ones that couldn't and who have actually gone home, they couldn't deal with it without, not so much a phone, but they just couldn't be online when they're supposed to be with their other friends.
So I challenge you, plan your camps where there's no reception.
Yeah. Well, this particular boy just got picked up, brought home. He wasn't coping at all, and what can you do? But like you say, it just begins, the ministries in the home, like 1 or 4 or 5 camps a year out of reception isn't going to, train these kids to have media time or whatever. It's definitely in the home.
Yep.
Even talking about the Sabbath free from phone, there was in the record a couple of weeks ago, there was a theme about that for the lady.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can, brothers and sisters can read it in.
There's a book not whatever, it's called the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, I think it's called, and it talks about the idea of families spending Sabbath together, and that if the church realised that what we offer with the Sabbath is something that people want, to be able to stop consuming and rest from all that hurry that the world has, yeah, there's something really much to offer there. So yeah.
Yeah,
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I was more after something practical that they can actually participate in, so they can use up time to participate in church activities rather than their phones. And I was thinking in terms of like, do you think it's a good idea to have like a teenage choir so they can participate in the services every Sabbath?
Yep.
Or maybe they can play role during the story time for the children. In that way, they become, involved in the service. It's just a couple of ideas.
There's some good ideas there. Yeah.
And also, I'm just thinking whether we can actually use the phones, and someone who's smart enough to design a texting evangelism program where they can use their phones just using texting as a form of evangelism. I don't know, it's just an idea, but I think someone can come up with an idea how to actually put that in a program.
There is technology you can use for that, but yeah, the thing is, when it comes to technology, the key word, same with health, is balance, variety, moderation. And remember, we can't take the phones off them completely. That's how teens communicate. That's how their identity is tied up in their phones. It's the way they are, so we can't take it off them, but yeah, we can teach them how to responsibly use the phone, and that comes from us as adults being the examples as well, and making sure that we show what that looks like. We put our phone down when it needs to be put down. Often we as dads are the worst because we say, oh, I might get a work call, I might get called for this, but even when I was a kid, the only phone you had was a landline, and people knew to ring the landline and you didn't have to answer it. It was an answering machine. The same as a phone now. You don't have to answer it. You don't have to respond to a text. You don't have to. You can put it onto airplane mode, and yeah, the challenge is to work out those times when you're going to turn it off and know that people can leave a message and that you will get back to them. Maybe it's going to be after the weekend. But we're in this instant gratification age when if you don't respond to an email in so many hours and you're seen as being rude, or if you don't return a call after so many hours and you're seen as being rude, well, that's just doesn't have to be. And yeah, as a family, you set those rules together of how you're going to embrace technology, and remember that we as parents are still paying for it, literally. We're paying the dollars for the mobile phone bills, but we're also paying for what it's doing to our kids. And yeah, we need to make sure that as we toughen up in this space as well. So, yeah.
As far as no technology for the whole of the Sabbath time, Friday nights is a big night for our family because we watch the Sandra Edelman sing-along.
Yep.
So they all know Friday nights. That's what's on. I live stream it from Facebook to the TV because I know how to work that. But it's really a good evening, and you get a mixture of songs, and it goes worldwide. So it's a good evangelistic program as well.
It is.
And good for the family home.
It is, and things like that. But the challenge is, how do we make Friday night special and Sabbath special? If we work on that, when we enter into experiences and togetherness as a family, the phones actually get forgotten. They get put down and forgotten if we're able to create those experiences, like the Friday night traditions and the things that we do on Sabbath. If we are engaged as parents and grandparents, often the phones will get put to one side and forgotten about. But often the phone gets picked up when the kids are bored or when mum and dad are busy doing their own thing, and they're left, as a book title says, left to their own devices, that the phone comes out. But often if there's experiences happening as a family, the kids more likely involved in those and forget about the phone. So that's a challenge. Anything else down the back?
So I have a question. So in year one, we have kids that there's a certain time that they learn stuff on the iPad,
Yes.
and then you can tell that the ones that aren't exposed to it, they really struggle. So they're kids that really excel in the classroom, reach the objectives of the lesson,
Yep.
and then the ones that are struggling behind because they don't have that exposure. My question is, when is it safe to have them have that exposure as kids?
As a smartphone.
Yes.
My advice to that would be to hold off as long as you possibly can. Allow your children to blame you as a parent for not giving them a mobile smartphone and wear it as a badge of honour. So say your kids blame your dad, that's fine. You can blame me, I'm a tough dad. My son did not get his smartphone until he was in year 10 at school when he needed it, because then they start scanning those QR codes and things as part of their work with their exams and things. So he actually needed it for school. But when he got it, there was a sit-down tech agreement and rules put in place for breaking that tech agreement, which included losing the device for 24 hours or whatever time it was. For me, it was a win-win because I meant it got him off the device, and there was a punishment. So that worked. My daughter, she got hers when she was in year 9 because, again, things had changed a little bit and she needed them in year 9 for what she was doing, but the same tech agreement. But my advice is hold off as long as possible. Your kid says they want a phone, go buy them a Nokia flip phone. If you as parents think they need a phone, get them a Nokia and say, look, I'm a tough parent. You'll thank me for it one day. Just as Gillespie says, we need to toughen up in this space particularly. And the idea of FOMO, the fear of missing out, they call it, and keeping up with the Joneses, they're just fallacies. And honestly, your kid does not really need a mobile phone until they're in year 10, in my opinion, a smartphone, that is. And mobile phone, yes, especially if we aren't there to parent them face-to-face when they're after school or when they're walking home or the bus, whatever it might be. But smartphone, my advice is hold off as long as you possibly can. And when it comes to your smartphone, when you upgrade, you can trade it in. You don't have to give it to your child. You can trade it in and use it as collateral for your next phone. But we are literally giving our children a drug when we hand them a phone. And we don't hand them smokes, we don't hand them alcohol, we don't hand them drugs, but we are giving them the drug when we give them a mobile phone. So hold off giving them the drug as long as you can.
Test. My question, referring to the first presentation this morning, if I am an authentic or intentional person, and I see someone who is addicted, and they take it as a dopamine, how can I change that addicted child or addicted person? I'm pretty sure there are some kids, they're addicted. How can I change them if I am self-authentic and intentional person?
Yeah, I'm not quite hearing that one. Can someone else pass it on as well? I'm not quite hearing that one for some reason, my hearing. Yeah, sorry, that's me with my hearing. I'm not hearing what you're saying properly. My apologies.
My question is, if I'm intentional and if I taught myself and I'm authentic person, how can I help kids, those who are like, they're already addicted? How can I help them?
Addicted, someone who's addicted?
Yes.
Yep. What can you do for someone who's addicted?
Yes.
Addictions of any description are very hard to break. And once, they say the same patterns, pathways in the brain for smoking, for drugs, for pornography, or any of those addictions, it's the same pathway when it comes to technology, screens, gaming, whatever it is, addiction. It's a very, very hard to break. And going cold turkey, That's one way to try, but with kids that's really, really hard. The way that I would do it would be to make sure that you get them outside in the bright sun, especially early morning, so if you can, and outdoors, somewhere away from the phone. Walk with them, exercise with them, talk with them, and slowly increase the amount of time that they're away from that. Is the only way. It's going to be a weaning off the technology. You can't remove it straight away, but also there are, with a child, there are parent controls that both Google or Android and the iPhone have that you can put in place where it actually stops them from going from certain sites and it cuts off their phone after a certain amount of time. So you have an agreement, you got an hour online, then the phone's going to shut down. So that it still allows them to have that time online, but it's putting in place some of those barriers. But it's a slow weaning off period. It's very, very hard to break. And as Gillespie said, we are all addicted to some extent. Whilst our kids are more addicted than we are, we as adults are catching up fast. The things like, I don't know if you ever noticed, if your phone is not in your pocket, and you'll still feel a buzz. How does that happen? You think your phone's buzzing, and it's actually a phenomenon where people think their phone's buzzing. I reach down, my phone's not even in my pocket, but a fake buzz that's occurring, and you think your phone's buzzing. So there's those sorts of things, and they're all signs of addiction. So what they're saying is that we all have some form of addiction to technology. As Glenn says, we're catching up fast behind our kids. What we need to do is to even ourselves is wean ourselves off, set some limits, set some boundaries, and build up that time you're away from your devices. And enjoy the great outdoors, find a hobby, grow a garden. I recommend keeping show poultry. That's my addiction. But yeah, growing a veggie patch, COVID proved that was a really good thing to do with mental health, was growing a veggie patch. Getting the hands in the soil is amazing. There's so much research around what the hands in the soil does for addiction, but also for depression and some of those sorts of things. So what it need to do is build some boundaries in place around that addiction and slowly wean it down. You can't just really, especially with kids, go cold turkey. But the better idea is right from the start, 1 hour online, 2 hours offline is your tech agreement, which stops that addictive tendency from that GABA and what they call it, and the delta phos B I talked about. 2 hour online, 2 hours offline drops the addictive tendencies and resets the brain. So that's what the paediatricians are recommending we do with our kids, is to make sure we have that built into our tech agreement so that they don't become addicted in the first place. One more maybe? Is there one more before we get over here all afternoon with questions? We'll have another question time after this presentation. I think that's it. Good. Okay. Let's pray. We're moving to this afternoon's presentation. Let's bow our heads. Loving Father in heaven, talk about these very important topics of technology and raising kids with spiritual resilience and raising our boys and our girls. Just bless us and help us to think about what we can do, the simple things we can do with our families, with our children or our grandchildren, or those in our sphere of influence to make a difference. This we pray in thy name. Amen. So our next presentation is 7 tips for parenting boys and 7 tips for parenting girls. This one is one I put together by special request from the Northern Australian Conference. Just come back from big camp up there, and I said, what topics do you want? They said, well, how do we raise boys and how do we raise girls in today's day and age when families are under pressure so much? So that's where it comes from. And again, these are Pastor Darren's tips from my parenting, my research, my prayer, my mulling on these things. So you might disagree, you might agree, or you might find your own, and that's all good too. But here's some tips to think about. According to Amanda Abel, a paediatric psychologist in Australia, she said across the board, kids are overscheduled today. They've grown up with that in younger years and become their expectation as teenagers. They think, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to be the best at this and the best at that. This makes it difficult to make decisions and prioritise activities. In other words, when they're overscheduled, they're always switched on, they're never switched off, and they find it difficult to make decisions. And you try and ask them about what they want to do, and they don't know. You ask them about to make a decision or a choice, and they don't know. They want to keep their options open as long as possible and make a decision at the end. That's why I found interest with youth groups these days. When you're trying to run a youth activity and you're trying to get sign up with these kids, often you won't get them sign up. In fact, they might turn up at the last minute, unless there's another alternative comes up. Then they will then go there. It's what they call the options generation, wanting to keep their options open. So it makes it really hard to run a youth group when you've got these kids that are so overscheduled and want to keep their options open for the next big thing that they're less likely to commit. This is from the Secondary Principals Association. Andrew Pierpoint says the teen years are more complex than they were a decade ago. And a big swag of students are balancing part-time jobs with sporting commitments, separated families, and even caring for elderly family members. These are all things that the average student does much more now. And so, especially I find in the city, families are busy. Mums and dads are busy, often just trying to keep bread on the table and to pay the mortgage, whatever else. It's interesting that when I was chaplain last year, that the after-school care, there are still kids in after-school care 6:30, 7 o'clock at night because mum and dad haven't got home from work yet. And this is the society that we live in. And often, as they get older, they're off doing a part-time job. They have to play sport. They have to do this, have to keep up with the Joneses. And in a recent presentation, I was asked by parents, so how do you stop that? How do you stop keeping up with the Joneses? Because that's the pressure to want the best for your children is very, very strong, especially in the city. And the fear of missing out, not just for our kids, but for us as parents, is very strong. We want the best for our children. But the question I ask is, when do the children have time to be bored? And it's often in boredom that innovation and creativity occurs. And when do they have time to be bored is something we need to think about as a parent. Yes, we want our kids to be successful, but there's a fine line between overscheduling our kids and pushing our kids so hard that they lose their resilience. And we'll talk about resilience in the next session as well. Maggie Dent, and this is a book well worth getting. If you haven't got it, if you've got girls, this one's worth getting to have a read. It's quite a thick book, but it's full of really, really good advice. She also does the podcast Parental as Anything. Maggie Dent, she's Australian, I think she lives in Perth, said in many ways our girls are doing well, for example, outperforming boys at school. We know that. Across the developed world, however, there are other areas which our girls are struggling. High rates of self-harm, increases in the suicide rate in recent years, huge pressure from media to be perfect, the influence of porn on emerging sexuality, sexualisation from a young age. Our girls need their parents, mums and dads, and other influences in their lives to step up and help them shine. Once again, the power of a connected parent. And then she says she's written a companion book from boys to men. Again, if you've got boys, this one's well worth getting as a companion book in bookstores. She says one of the most pervasive stereotypes that needs to be challenged about gender and childhood is that little boys are in some ways stronger and tougher than little girls. She says, sure, there is generally a difference in the muscle formation of boys compared to girls developmentally. Strength that is physical, especially core strength, is one thing. However, strength or competence that comes from emotional and social maturity is very different. Just because little boys tend to have higher energy levels, tackle more physically demanding pursuits, or enjoy playing superheroes more than girls, it does not mean that they are actually tougher, just different. And yeah, often we say to boys, toughen up, don't be a sissy, and these sorts of things which put our boys down and speaks into the very core. But boys are just as vulnerable in different ways to girls. She says the early years window is when they shape their sense of self, their self-worth, their identity, their capacity to regulate big feelings, and their expectation of how the grown-ups in their world will treat them. In adolescence, especially with the increasing intensity of their emotional world, many lads struggle with irrational anger and frustration. Often, this has been shaped unintentionally and unconsciously in the first 5 years of life. So what she's saying is that our boys, when they become teenagers, are angry and frustrated because of the way that we've conditioned them, the way that we've raised them, the way that we've told them they've got to be tough, they've got to be physical, they've got to almost be aggressive, they've got to win at all costs. Sadly, research shows that many grown-ups treat boys more harshly than they treat their girls. They often speak in a harsher tone and assume that it won't cause any harm. How you speak to your children, both boys and girls, makes a huge difference. This book, again, I was quoted this morning by Meg Meeker, is well worth getting. She really comes from a spiritual background, which some of the other books don't. And yeah, she mentions the God factor in this book a lot, and I would highly recommend, if you've got boys, this one, Boys Should Be Boys. She says, boys need trees, they need dirt to make into mud, and things to smash outside. From the time they are born, boys are orientated to more gross motor skills than what girls are. Gamers know this. So they purposely design the games to attract our boys. And for some reason, when it comes to addiction, I said earlier this morning, girls become addicted to social media and call approval. Boys are more likely to become addicted to gaming, all sorts of gaming, and spend hours on it because the idea of adventure, the idea of conquering, the idea of rescuing, the idea of the near miss are all built into these games, and it's interesting how that proceeds. It's also interesting that games are not as regulated as we would like them to be when it comes to this is a TV program, you know, if it's general, if it's PGR, if it's adults only, you get that. But with gaming, it's a lot different. And what we're finding is that people like grandparents are buying their boys a game called Grand Theft Auto 5. I'm buying my child a car game. And what they don't realise is that as part of that game, the boys have to go and kill a prostitute and dump her to advance to the next level. And it's now they've made it so it's not just remote. You almost got your hands on the wheel. It's lifelike, and the effects it's having on the kids' brains is still being tested and still being understood. What I call the greatest social experiment is happening right now with our boys and our girls, and we're not sure yet what the effects of this is going to be. But what we're seeing is boys in Australia will often stay up late into the night because the best players are in Korea, Japan, and other countries, and they want to stay up late night to take them on and play them. And so you think your son's gone to bed, but he has gone to bed, but next minute you know he's up and he's playing these games late into the night or early morning. And then these kids get up to go to school. Because they're so tired, they go through the supermarket on the way and they buy a 4-pack of a product called Mother or Red Bull, or a newer one that's been just released recently. I can't remember the name of it, but I was reading about it recently. It's multicoloured. Everyone wants it. It's the current rage. Prime. There, you guys know more than I do. Prime. Yep. Again, the energy drink is banned in Australia at the moment. It's just a cordial, but kids are getting it imported into Australia and then selling it in the playground because it's trendy to have this energy drink. And so what the kids are doing is that they drink one for breakfast, one at recess, one at lunchtime to keep them going, basically to keep them awake. Because, and then we wonder why we've got aggression in the playground and other issues, because these boys are playing games, drinking high energy, playing games the next night, and they're constantly tired and in this spiral that is just dangerous to be in. Even the high energy drinks are not good for our boys, let alone our girls. But yeah, this is what they're in. And gaming addiction is a very real thing that is on the rise in Australia, and something you really need to be aware of. That's why I say don't allow technology in the bedrooms, especially for our boys, but girls too, because girls it's with social media. But yeah, just be aware of what's going on. One thing that aggravates parents about little boys is the fact that they like to move. They don't colour in the lines like girls generally do. They leap over couches and run down halls. Boys, as I say, boys have got that higher energy. Academically, boys develop more slowly than girls. Too often they get labelled as having a learning difficulty simply because they are jumpy and can't concentrate. This is my son, by the way. He couldn't stay in his seat. And when we went and interviewed for the new school when we shifted, we would ask, so what do you do with a kid that can't stay in their seat? He was bright, he took it in, but he was all over the place. And there was one story, the teacher rang us and said, we did a lockdown. All the other kids hopped under the desk, but your son jumped up and was helping pull the blinds down and lock the doors. What do we do about that? And I said, he likes to be helpful, but yeah. But he wasn't naughty, he just would not stay in his seat. And yeah, it was a handful for the teachers. As they reach their early elementary years, the boys catch up with their female counterparts. They just learn differently. So often we'll label a boy as naughty, we'll label him as delayed, we'll label him as not able to concentrate, but they develop slower. They're just different. And need to sometimes be careful to label our kids, and we live in an age where we want to have a label for everything and medicate everything. Nothing wrong with that, by the way, sometimes, because it is necessary, but the current generation of boys is the most diagnosed generation we have on the planet, ever. And yeah, it's nice to get names for them and to diagnose them, but at the same time, you've got to remember that boys are born, they will act ADD, and as they get older, it balances out a little bit more. Another good book is by Justin Colson, just out recently, The Parenting Revolution. Justin Colson is an expert on resilience. He says that multimedia messages focus on female sexualised imagery and their bodies rather than their brains or their personality or who they are. So consequently, everywhere a young girl goes, she sees messages that make her feel that she's not good enough unless she looks a certain way. Girls are now expected to be all things. You can see that the pressure is there, and it's now 24/7 like never before. And the TikTok videos, the YouTube videos, the social media posts are all playing into this idea, especially for our girls. And they just realise that they can't measure up instead of realising that they're normal. And this is playing into the current girls. They're supposed to be attractive and thin and good and successful and happy and kind and loving and self-sufficient, perfect in other words, and it's taking its toll. Our daughters are showing their distress with rising rates of mental health problems, binge drinking, eating disorders and bullying. And it's common in our schools today. Michelle Mitchell, who wrote the book called Tweens, and this has been the latest as far as development goes in parenting, is the realisation that tweens is important age group to parent in, and you'll find a lot of books coming out today in that area. She says the two strongest drivers for tweens on the journey to adulthood are working out their own sense of identity and finding where they belong. That's the two questions that are driving them. That advertising, that gaming, that social media, that the news cycle even plays into. I don't know if you realise this, but research found that especially our girls would stay online longer if they published negative news stories. And so they found all the news stories around the world, all the things that are going wrong with the world, and they put those together. The positive stories are there, but they don't keep our kids online. But the negative news cycle does. And so they purposely have the algorithms for our kids so that when they're online, and the news cycle they're getting is purposely the negative cycle because it keeps them online longer and means that they can monetize that and get more money from the advertising. And so our girls especially are getting this negative news cycle 24/7. It's interesting, if you want to do an experiment on your phone or your social media, sign yourself up as a 14-year-old boy or a 14-year-old girl. You can make fake profiles and put in your age as around the age of 14 and see what the algorithms do to you. Very quickly, what the advertising you start getting and what they start marketing to your kids. It's interesting to just do that and have a look at the pornography, the violence, the games that are advertised, the negative news cycle that they get, all aimed to keep your children online for longer because that brings sales, that brings ads, that brings the dollars. And they've done the research to know how to keep your kids online for the longest. For the most part, Michelle Mitchell says, relatable and healthy role models are missing in action. Tweens are either depicted as goofy, silly children or overly grown up and sexualised adolescents with very little in between. Where are the good role models, she asks. Her most important finding, she says, is that tweens gravitate towards those who are approachable, who will help them overcome challenges and who listen to them. My question is, are you as a parent or are you as a mentor, are you approachable? Are you there for them and do you listen? Sometimes we're quick to solve, but we're not quick to listen. And I've got to teach myself, especially when Madison's talking on the way home, to say, really? Tell me more. I wonder. And you ask those questions to show you're listening and to help her go deeper. And I, as a dad, because males want to give advice, we are primed to want to fix things. That's who we are. But to be able to shut my mouth and open my ears, especially with my daughter, but also my son, but more so with my daughter, during her teen years, was one of the most important things that I was told to do. The art of listening is powerful. And for the child, for them to feel heard really heard is significant in the teenage years. So learn, especially as dads, to shut the mouth, don't solve the problems, and just ask the I wonder, really, and yeah, let your child know that you are listening to them. According to this is powerful. So, with that in mind, let's run through quickly 7 tips for our boys, and then we'll do 7 tips for our girls. Here's the boys first. The 21st century has brought dramatic changes on every level. The power of marketing, pop culture, and technology, in particular, are impacting our boys. The assault on values, self-esteem, and emotional stability of boys is driven by stealth advertising, a rampant consumer culture, and unfiltered new technologies which expose boys to explicit pornography and violent fantasy worlds packaged as entertainment. So what our boys are grappling with: autonomy and independence as they move into their tween and teen years, their hunger to belong and be with, and thirdly, their search for identity. They're the 3 things that our boys are looking for. These coincide with brain, hormonal, and physical, psychological, and emotional changes. So here's the 7 things. Don't shame them. Shame is something that in Australian culture at least, we seem to almost use it as a tool of management, but it doesn't help our boys long term. And shame or guilting them, all you end up is with a very angry and confused teenager who is vulnerable. And so they know they're awkward. They know that they're moody. They know they're forgetting things. They know that they're searching for something more. But by shaming them only feeds into that rather than helping them. So find ways to talk to them without putting them down and shaming them. Number 2, especially when they reach their tween years, let them know they're not stupid. They're just developing. They're not stupid, they're just developing. And when they're searching for belonging and acceptance, and often I know with my son, he'll tell himself that he was stupid. I'm just so stupid. And I used to keep correcting, no, you're not stupid. You're just going through the teenage years, and yeah, you're growing into a man. And this is part of that, and I'm here for you. And let them know that yeah, you value them for who they are. And they still need to hear as a dad, especially, that you love them. Number 3, don't forget the loving names for our boys. When they're little kids, we often have terms of endearment we use or little nicknames we use with our kids. My name growing up was Darren, which is shortened Darren. I knew when I got called Darren that I was in trouble and to run in the other direction. But Darren, D-R-N, was a term of endearment my family used. My dad, for some reason, called me Harry. I don't know why, but I was a Harry to him, always a Harry to him. And again, a term of endearment. And I remember as a 4 or 5-year-old, I'd run down to the gate at night to open it and let my dad drive in, because I would hop in the car with him to go up the driveway, and it's probably about half a kilometre, and I'll get called Harry, and it was my time with Dad. And yeah, those terms of endearment mean something. And often when our kids get to that awkward tween years, we stop using those terms of endearment from parents that we have for our kids. But they still need to hear it, because it communicates, I still love you, I still accept you, you still belong. So use those terms of endearment more so when they reach the tween and teen years as a boy. Number 4, and it's probably most significant with boys, nagging them is like shouting into a void. They won't hear you. They won't hear you. And often we want to nag, we want to get them to do things right, but as we've discovered this morning, the brain is developing, and part of growing up is that they will feel confused, they will feel like they're vulnerable, they will forget things, they will become confused, they become vulnerable. And nagging them is like shouting to a void. Melanie Greenberg, a psychologist and parenting expert, says when parents go on and on, kids tune them out. Researchers have shown that the human brain can keep only 4 chunks of information or unique ideas in short-term active memory at once. That's still true for me today. When my wife rings and says, can you go shopping and get this, this, and this, I tell her more than 3, send me a text message. After that, I don't remember anything. I say, remember 3 things, but not 4. So I tell her, anything above 3, you need to send me a text message of a shopping list because I'm not going to remember it. But yeah, especially with our kids, keep it small, keep it simple, and often a list on the fridge to tick off is very handy. Because they might remember the one thing you asked them to do, but they remember the second or the third. So a to-do list on the fridge saying, when you've done this, you do this, when you've done this, you do that, is very helpful. Even like the going to bed ritual. Have a list. You brush, especially with kids, you have your cookie and milk, what are you going to do? You brush your teeth, you do this, you say your prayers, I will come and tuck you in. You have the ritual up because they're not going to remember more than 1 or 2 or 3 if they're really, really good. So she says that this amounts to about 30 seconds or 1 or 2 sentences of speaking. And then catching our children doing something positive and complimenting them is far more effective than nagging. So the old saying, 5 positives for your boys especially, for the 1 negative. So if you want to get your son or your grandson to pick up their dirty clothes and put them in the laundry bag or basket and they keep forgetting and never makes it there, okay, I'm going to think of 5 positive things that I'm going to say to my son before I even mention that one. Because we need to accentuate the positive. They know the negative and they're ready for that. But try and find the 5 positives first. And if you can't find them, make them up. But yeah, 5 positive things before you mention the negative. And this is good for marriage advice too, by the way. When you're having that argument, look for the positives rather than the negative. Extremely important. Building rapport, shared hobbies and interests, timing and tone of voice, and with sons especially when you want to have that chat, it's avoiding direct eye contact. It's doing things together. It's better to talk to your son when you're tinkering with an engine in the shed, or you're fishing together, or driving together. The side on is really important for boys especially, rather than the direct confrontation. And it sinks in better too, and it builds that rapport better than anything else. Number 5, make your home, and this is for girls too, but really for boys, more so for boys than girls, but it is important for boys and girls. Make your home a safe place for friends and family. This is where you want to invite their peers in, so you know who their peers are, you know what's going on in their lives as well, and you're a bit of a mentor to them. But also you know who your son's getting around with and who's in their friendship group. But also where mentors can be. The lighthouse there is intentional because Maggie Dent calls these sorts of people the mentors in your boy's life lighthouses in what can be sometimes a pretty dark world. And building lighthouses in your home as a safe place where your son can come to is pretty important. Talking about making home a safe place, my kids both knew if they went out with their friends and something was happening they didn't agree with or made them feel uncomfortable, rather than staying, all they had to do was send me an X symbol from their phone. An X symbol. That gave me the permission to create a family emergency where I had to go and pick them up. So it gave them an out with their friends. It gave them a way that they knew that they could escape uncomfortable situations or confronting situations or situations they didn't quite know how they got there and need to get out of. And they just knew that send me an X, I'll be in the car, I would text them with, I need to come and get you now, there's a situation at home. Didn't tell them what it was, but they could say to their friends, my dad's coming to get me because something's happened. And it gave them an out, a way to get out of, and it saved them many a time. So have that code where you can communicate and gives you a way to build an out to go and pick them up. And it helps them to learn that they don't have to go along with the crowd too and avoid the peer group pressure. Because, oh, my dad's coming to get me, something's happened. Yeah. Number 6, for boys, marinate them in stories of good men. As I said in the sermon, stories build identity, and stories can build a 100-year-old identity very quickly in our kids. But the stories of good men, stories of the Daniels of the world and the Josephs of the world, stories of men who overcame, or stories of even like Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, and George Mueller, who built an orphanage, and all those sorts of stories of good men and how they overcame. It helps build identity, it helps build empathy, it helps build compassion, which I want for my boys, and gives them something to aim for and emulate in their lives. So collect those good stories, tell those good stories. And the Bible is full of those good stories for our boys. Number 7, love them as they are, not for what you think they should be. Often we put high expectations on our boys, wanting them to be this, wanting to do that, wanting to be in a certain mould, but each boy is unique and they're different to us. That's the way God made them. And so as a parent, loving them as they are, not for what you think they should be, is a powerful way to communicate acceptance and value and belonging to them like nothing else can. So there's the 7 for boys. As I said, it works for girls too, and you'll find the girls' ones are also relatable, but they're slightly different. Let's run through our 7 tips to raise our girls. When it comes to girls, connect, connect, connect. Build connection, and the earlier you build connection with your girls, the better. We earn the right to speak into our daughter's life at age 16, when we have spent the years before that building connection, time, play, and being there for them. And you can't just do that overnight. You can't expect to speak into your daughter at 16, especially if you as a dad, but also a mum, have not had that connection with them in those years to that. So start young, start early, and build that connection. There's something about daughters that's different to sons. They often wrap their dads around a little finger, and that's natural. I'll do anything for my daughter, and if she rings and says, can we go on a date, Dad? It's now often her initiating the dates, and I will drop everything to be there for that. So tomorrow, we're going because she wants to see Barbie. Do I want to go and see Barbie? No. No, she wants to. So I'm going for the journey, and I'll take the short route there and the long route home because she wants to do that. And even though I'm busy and I've got so many things to do, she's had a hard week. I haven't seen her all week. She's been nursing what they call the afternoon shift. So I get up early, go to work, she's still asleep. She gets up and goes to work at, she does the 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. So the time she gets home, I'm already asleep. So I haven't seen her all week. So she actually messaged me 2 days ago and said, Dad, can we go and see a father-daughter date and do Barbie? And I was tempted to say, I'm too busy, but I thought, no. She's initiated the date. I'm going to go along for the date. I'm going to continue to build connection. Your job as a parent is never done. And a father-daughter date is powerful. But you can't just say at 16, let's go on a father-daughter date. I say, ew, Dad, what are you up to? Now? I started dating my daughter when she was born, basically, and it's just a regular thing we do. If I don't get there, she will initiate them now and want a father-daughter date. So it's a great way to teach your daughter. I say that a dad is a daughter's first love. I think there's something in that. And you teach them what it means, what to look for in a man, and hopefully she'll choose the right partner down the track. So, and also listen to the little stuff. Girls especially seem to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And it might be little stuff to you, but it's big stuff to them. So I will listen. I will actively listen to little stuff. I will talk about the little stuff because I know that when the big stuff that I think is big stuff needs to be talked about, I'm there for that as well. So listen to little stuff. This quote there, the parent-child connection is the most powerful mental health intervention known to mankind. And in an age where mental health, I've got a presentation on mental health I do sometimes, the parent-child connection is the greatest antidote to mental health issues, especially with girls. Number 2, with girls, belonging is everything, especially when she's in year 7 and 8. And your job as a parent is to realise that and to help her find her tribe where she belongs. So curate those events where she can invite her friends to. You help curate in those early years the friendship group she's in, knowing that when she's in year 7 and 8 is going to mean everything. And so the parent is the curator of the friendship group, and you help her find her tribe for when she really needs it as she moves into those year 7 and 8 years. Number 3, help her feel that she is enough because she is. As the research said, parents trump everything else. And when media and social media and advertising and the news cycle and their friends and others are throwing at them, you are not good enough, you have to do this, you have to wear that, you have to buy this, you have to do this. As parents, we need to trump that and tell her regularly that you love her just the way she is, that she is enough, that she is awesome, and that she has your unconditional love and regard. If we can get that through to her, especially in the early years, it's going to ameliorate the effects of what society, especially in today's day and age, is throwing at her, where she's told she is not enough, that she is ugly, that she's fat, that she's not wearing the right clothes, and you've got to wear this makeup. By the way, the biggest selling makeup market now is men. Marketing makeup to men, because they've made everything for women. So they're now marketing makeup to men. And that's the biggest growth area right now. So some of this stuff is about to kick into our boys as well. Number 4, help her negotiate the online world. As we've explained, social media is having a negative impact on well-being, especially for girls. So putting in place the limits, My daughter knew that I had access, when she got onto social media, she's not meant to go until she's 13 anyway, so kids online, before that, they're not meant to be online. But she knew that I could access her social media at any time, and that as a dad, I wanted to protect her, and to be able to know what's been thrown at her, and to be able to ameliorate those effects, but also to help her put the phone down and not be online 24/7. Yeah, helping her manage her online experience is really important, especially for our girls. Number 5, help her feel beautiful. This is especially so for mums. Be aware of yours and their body talk. As a mother, if you're saying, I've got to go on a diet, I'm too fat, I'm ugly, I need to exercise, I don't want to eat that, I've got to lose weight. If you keep on saying that in front of your daughter, you're building a negative self-image of yourself, and you're also imparting a negative self-image to her as well. So sometimes as a mother, you've got to know that you're beautiful, but also don't engage yourself in that negative talk. And be aware of their talk. My daughter used to say regularly that she's ugly. And I would have to speak and say, no, you're beautiful just the way you are. You are gorgeous. And hearing that from mums, but also especially from dads, is powerful. Once again, trying to bring down the effects of what society is telling her. But yeah, be aware of yours and their body talk, and pull her up on it when she is trashing herself is really, really important. Your daughter is beautiful, just the way she is, just the way God made her. And help her to realise that is powerful, especially when they start to reach that tween-teen years. Number 6 for girls, regular discussion about the hard stuff: sex, intimacy, consent, peers, friendship. Do it young and often. Now, it's also true for boys as well. And today we've got to start younger than ever before. Your child, by the age of 11, will have been exposed to pornography. If not on their phone, it's often on a friend's phone, or it's on a USB stick that's handed to them, or other things like that. But they're going to see it, whether they've got a phone or not, they're going to see it. And what they're finding in today's day and age, that both girls and boys are taking their sex scripts, their sex education, from what they're seeing online. And what they're seeing is violent, choking, rape culture, consent is not even talked about and considered. Yeah, it really is giving our kids a sex script that is just unwholesome. And yeah, it's really hard to talk about, but it's there, and it really is violent stuff. And then these kids from a young age are trying to enact this on others, thinking it's normal. 5, 6, 7-year-olds are now coming into the classroom trying to do stuff on their classmates, which is just porn-induced violence. And it really is on the increase in our society. And often we as parents are embarrassed to have that discussion, but the birds and bees discussion needs to come from us first, and to have it as young as possible in an age-appropriate way. My daughter almost delighted herself on asking those hard sex questions from a very young age in the car. Often Andrew would be embarrassed because he's 4 years older, but Lisa, to her credit, and she often took them to school because I was already be gone often, she'll just have a matter-of-fact talk and normalise it and discuss it in an age-appropriate manner. And she knew from a very young age what it's all about, my daughter did, and it was just normal to have that discussion and normalise the whole thing, so that when she did get exposed to the trash stuff, which happened fairly quickly as well, she already had the parenting discussion ahead of that. So as a parent, you need to stay ahead of the game and have those hard discussions. Again, often that drive time, other time like that, is the one-on-one time when that can occur. Number 7, with our girls, always keep the end in mind. Now, I don't know how to talk about this other than say it this way. Leave some of the sassiness, rough edges, willfulness on. It's going to help her go places when she's later on. It might annoy you. It might, sometimes my daughter will say stuff. I say, what are you saying, Madison? But leaving and knowing, learning the art of what sassiness they need to have is a hard one, but they need enough to protect them when they're out in the world on their own. And so leave some of the sassiness, and you as a parent need to discuss what that looks like, but Lisa and I had that discussion around our daughter regularly about how much sassiness, and she was naturally sassy. Girls are naturally sassy. But to leave some of that there and to know how to guide her was a discussion we had regularly just to help protect her down the track. Talk about the sense of empowerment that she needs to have versus respect and where that line is. And pray for your children. I've got someone asked, though, what if my child has left the church? Says that is for their child, even when they're left, in bringing them back, non-judgmental attitude, so loving them, that they're loved, and also as a parent through the motions of going to church, of keeping your belief. There's those likely to bring the kids back. Bern Bankston's research discovered that after the power faithful and regularly children. The stories of his daughter, he held on a road himself. I do know the blessing. So he held that newborn baby in his arms and he prayed the blessing over her. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be graceful unto you. He blessed his daughter and said every day he would go in and say good night, and as a and then he'll and keep you. His face to shine upon his daughter. As she grew older, and the father says, often the door would be slammed in his face with a bit of teenage rebellion, and he would stand at the door. Blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. He blessed his daughter. Well, the child got older, and the father says sometimes she'll be out with her friends or whatever else at night, and he'll be in his chair waiting for her to come home. And before he went to sleep, he would pray the blessing for his daughter. Well, time went on. It came time for the child to go to uni. The hard time for parents. Packed all the stuff up. Not just boot, you need the trailer as well, but you put the trailer on and loaded all the stuff, took it down, made their daughter. They wanted her to, well, Mum said she needed a bed set up and made, and I was going to hang her clothes up. So Mum hung up the clothes, made the bed, and it came time to say goodbye, so they gave her a hug at the steps of the dormitory, walked down to the car, hopped in, breathed a sigh of relief, broken down. And the daughter, initially when they hear, and the daughter comes to the car park, and Mum hops out, Dad hops out. What have we forgotten? Dad says, I've checked the boot, there's nothing there, and nothing in the trailer, and what have you forgotten? And the daughter says, Dad, my dad, you forgot to pray the blessing. And the father knew in that moment his years of praying, his years of that. So his wife and his husband, one last time he prayed, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. We're all weeping. But it was worth it. It was worth it. Those, more than one, you can do to bless and pray for and encourage your children. Give girls chances to find their strengths and build on them. Help them to know as people, regardless of what society says, and sexiness. Help them to have healthy relationships with other men and women, and if you can, keep Dad helpfully and happily involved in their lives, because research tells us he is a bigger influencer on their well-being and on their life choices than we. That's Justin Colson. Love them and make sure they know it every day. So there it is. 7 ways for boys, 7 ways for girls. I think overall the summary would be build connection, build it young, build it regularly, and build it often. Would be number 1 key for both boys and girls. Okay, so we've got to 3 o'clock. Time for a break, because we've got one more session to come, which is how to build the resilience factor. So we might take a, 10-minute break? Yep, 10-minute break, bathroom, drink, whatever you might need. Be back here, what's it now, almost 10 past. So we'll say 20 past, we're going to start at 20 past with the last session. It'll take us through to about just after 4 o'clock. Thank you. Email me.